The fourth of Jesus' 7 last words from the cross comes from Matthew and Mark's gospel. And as Jesus lay dying, Matthew says at the 9th hour, as he hung dying on the cross at the 9th hour, it says that he cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? My God, why have you forsaken me? When we think about the cross, we rightly think of the physical toil and pain that Jesus must have had to endure. We can't even imagine it, right? The scourging to the point of almost death, the carrying of this heavy cross on his shoulders, even though he was exhausted, the deep crown of thorns stuck into his head, the blood running down his face, or perhaps even, worst of all, the nails piercing his hands and his feet. The physical pain of the cross must have been unbearable. But we also think about the emotional pain of the cross. Jesus was betrayed by one of his 12 closest associates and friends. He was denied 3 times by his lead disciple. He was abandoned as he hung there on the cross. The emotional pain to see these men and these friends who he had been with for so many years completely disperse and even betray him must have been agonizing. And yet, above all things, when we read the Gospels, what we realize is that it was the spiritual pain that had the deepest and most profound impact on Jesus. The forefront of Jesus' thought as he's dying on the cross is certainly Psalm 22. And that's what he's quoting when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? In Psalm 22, the psalmist he's trapped, he's encircled by his enemies, he's fearing certain death. And despite all these traps and these snares and these pain that he's facing, what is most clear is the psalmist is frightened by God's seeming absence. By the seemingly absent God. That's what comes to the forefront in Psalm 22. And so Jesus draws on this psalm in his moment of greatest agony. My God, why have you forsaken me? The intimacy and the unity that Jesus has shared with his Father from the beginning of time. This Trinitarian God who is 3 in 1, the intimacy and unity that they shared has now been broken as Jesus is enduring God's judgment and wrath towards sin. As Jesus hung on the cross, he willfully took on the sin of all mankind. He who knew no sin became sin, so that those who believed in him might become the righteousness of God. He willfully took on the sin of all mankind, and therefore he willfully took on the consequence and punishment for that sin, this punishment that we deserved. And that punishment, as we know even from way back in the Garden of Eden, is death, but not simply death, separation from God, separation from his Father, the Father that he so intimately knew, he so perfectly obeyed. It is a spiritual agony that Jesus is enduring, this forsakenness, seeming forsakenness by God. And so he cries out in anguish, my God, why have you forsaken me?